conceived the Leyat Hélica. He's plane without wings. It's powered by a 1.1 litre flat twin ABC Scorpion and the propeller, of course. The body is made from plywood and the passengers sit one behind the other. And I think he's not going to be able to stop, so he will come straight across. Leyat designed his own special wheels, as you can see, using aluminium discs with integrated brakes to further reduce drag. It has cable-operated rear-wheel steering, so not easy to keep in a straight line, but hopefully, look at that, Richard. What do you think of that?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You probably won't be surprised to know that only sports cars built to bear the DB initials after the company's new owner, David Brown. Sporting the new 3-litre twin-cam four-cylinder engine with stylish modern lines penned by Frank Feely, the DB2 caused a sensation at the 1950 New York Auto Show. The all-new car was a success on the racetrack as well, with works entries at the 1950 Le Mans, finishing 5th and 6th overall. No mean feat for a largely untested car.
Please do drive up, and if you'd like to stop, we'll be happy to see you. Richard, this particular DB2 Drophead is a well-known car itself, as it was in fact the prototype car built for the 1950 London Motor Show. It then became David Brown's personal runabout, as well as a press demonstrator, featured in numerous magazines. The first early DB2s can easily, they have column shift. Is this a column shift or a floor shift? It's a floor shift example. So I think the very early ones had column shift, but later when they looked to racing, they decided that floor shift was a better option for them. This car sadly fell into disrepair before being resurrected in 1970 and now presents, as it should, of course, very, very beautifully.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for coming along.
You two look very nice too.
Equally well restored, I would say. Now next, Peter, we have this 1958 BMW 507, one of only 253 examples built.
Yeah, and this car, Richard, it's a V8, presented in a very desirable specification, including these lovely Rudge wheels with the BMW logo in the middle. Elvis Presley drove a BMW 507, John Surtees drove a 507, Ursula Andress drove a 507. But do any of them have the sort of adventure you're going to tell us about now, Richard?
Well, this car rolled off the production line on the 4th of July 1958 and was delivered to the famous French dealer Imperial Garage just over a month later. In April 1960, the car was made available for a very short period to the Greek ambassador, Leonidas Papagos. He was the son of Alexandros Papagos, Prime Minister of Greece from 1952 to 55. Now, a month later, the BMW was returned to Imperial Garage, where a well-known and wealthy Lebanese couple fell in love with the car. They bought it for their son as a gift to mark the imminent end of his studies at the London School of Economics. The 507 was sent to London and kept in the garage of their family home. That summer, the young owner drove his BMW from London to Munich, where the manufacturer carried out some tests and minor repairs. He continued on to Austria, Switzerland, Italy, and finally Genoa, where the car embarked for Lebanon. He recalls that throughout his journey he was stopped countless times by people asking what the car was. The 507 was then held in Beirut, but it was regularly driven and even served as his wedding car in April 1969. Now, when the Civil War started in 1975, the family became worried that something might happen to their son's precious car and companion of many adventures. They asked their friend Munir Abu Haidar, president of Trans-Mediterranean Airways, for help. He took charge of the problem and sent the BMW on a London-bound company plane on the 6th of June 1975, and he continued to use it during his stays in England.
And Richard, in the spring of 2014, an Italian collector spotted this car in a Kensington side street, as you do, fascinated by the state of conservation. He clearly showing its age, but he wanted to buy it, so he left a note under the windscreen asking if he could buy the car as a gift to his wife. He didn't receive any calls for several months. He lost all hope until one day in July, while on holiday in Corfu, he received the long-awaited communication, and finally he was able to purchase this very car. And as we've said so many times, it's the stories as well as the cars and the owners that count, and you look delightful, it suits you.
Thank you very much for bringing it. This is 1965 Lancia Flaminia SS by Zagato. The Flaminia Berliner was launched at the Geneva Saloon in 1977 and will evolve into many different guises. Successor to the highly coveted B20 GT, it adopted the sophisticated V6 motor which had first appeared in the Aurelia. The final iteration of the Flaminia was the Super Sport from 1964 and, as presented here, one of just 150 built. Of all the Flaminias, the Super Sport Zagato model is the fastest and the most sought after. Drivers enjoyed the 152 horsepower from the 2.8-litre V6 motor with triple Webers, which meant it was good for 130 miles an hour.
And we talk so often about speed, power, horsepower, but it's also about refinement, handling, and the Flaminia had perfectly balanced handling because it was driven via a transaxle, giving it much better weight distribution. And this example has clearly benefited from a full nut and bolt restoration in this lovely neutral metallic silver, which really does complement these tight Zagato lines. It was restored by Lancia experts Thornley Kellam, presenting it today. And classic Lancias were innovative, sophisticated, refined and competitive motor cars in their day, up there with the very best from Italy. Many Italians will tell you in the early 60s these cars were as good as their Ferrari equivalents. They were driven by celebrities and race drivers of the era, including of course La Dolce Vita's Marcello Mastroianni. And to many, this car, the Flaminia, was the last true Lancia. Thank you for bringing it.
Now we'll move on to this 1955 HWM Jaguar. Delighted our chairman of the selection committee, Austion to brought the car over. This sensational HWM was a famous racing car from the 1950s, and one of those sadly forgotten marks today, although the company still exists. HWM stood for Hersham and Walton Motors. It was founded by George Abacassis and John Heath, both competent racing drivers themselves. Sadly, Heath was killed following an accident during the 1956 Mid-Amelia. Now, HWM enjoyed some success in single-seat race cars. Sterling Moss, Peter Collins and Paul Frere all made their GP debuts in HWM. And HWM were also the first proper mark to employ Jaguar's race-proven six-cylinder race unit in sports racing cars. The trend will be followed by many others.
And it's built, Richard, on a twin tubes chassis, and I think there are a lot of styling cues from other cars of the era. I mean, I personally can see a little bit of a Maserati A6 GCS, perhaps a bit of almost birdcage at the back, although the birdcage came later. But there's some. But what I love about this car is this muscular, really, this wide grille at the front, just made for sucking in air, almost like an athlete looking to go as quickly as possible. It's running on drum brakes, and it features the wraparound pre-appendix C wraparound screen that you would see on D-types of the era. Makes you feel like you're a fighter pilot. They later changed that to a full whip screen for the regulations. This car was raced by a who's who of British sports car racing drivers: Noel Cunningham Reid, Dick Prothero, Peter Blond, who'll be here on Sunday, Jack Fairman, Les Leston. This is a wonderful piece of British racing car design, and we celebrate it. Thank you for bringing it.
There is little giving away the fact that there is a Jaguar XK150S rolling chassis underneath this sublime work of art, except perhaps the central grille and the badging.
Now this Scaglione was the creative genius behind some of the most striking cars of the 20th century, including the Alfa Romeo Bat cars and the absolutely drop-dead gorgeous Alfa Romeo Tipo 33 Stradale. This is one of 8 XK150 chassis reimagined, and It was penned by the great Franco Scaglione working for Bertone. The lines are extremely modern with thin pillars, lots of glass, and the rear fins may have been inspired a bit by the back cars themselves. The Bertone prototypes were in fact rumoured to have been built as possible XK150 successors rather than the E-Type, which of course came later and was rather successful. But interesting to note the XKE badge on the side of this car, and of course the Jaguar script, which is very familiar. Purchased new in 1958 by Tommaso Ingenoli, a friend of and customer of Enzo Ferrari himself. It spent many years in the esteemed Black Hawk collection in California, and this is the sole XK150 Bertone believed still existing. So it's a privilege to see it, and thank you.
Thanks, Danny. It's a striking 1933 Rolls-Royce Phantom 2 Continental Touring Saloon by Bar. However, the tight lines on the Continental chassis could easily have belonged on a Coupé, so the owner must have had a keen eye and perhaps been a connoisseur of fine motor cars.
I think he probably was a connoisseur of fine motor cars, Richard, and he was pretty good at driving them too, because this car was in fact built for mythical speed ace Sir Malcolm Campbell. Campbell owned 3 Phantoms and loved them so much that he wrote for the brochure the best Rolls-Royce yet produced, and I think he knew a thing or two about motor cars.
He did.
It has a number of special order features ordered by Campbell, such as the low rake steering column, not that you can see it because it's too low, wider tracks, special dampers, and a St. Christopher fixed to the dash. Do have a look, do have a close look. Recently acquired by the present owner, it's soon to be shipped to India to form part of a very special museum collection. It's really wonderful and a fabulous history. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love this car. This is a 1928 4.5 litre Bentley by Saloon. Now this car, ladies and gentlemen, is affectionately known as Mr. Fred. The Hampton Drophead Sports Coupé is one of only 2 that have been coach built at Salmons and Sons of Newport Packet. And this example was the personal scene of Fred Salmon himself, hence that name. It features sensuously curved front wings as well as rear, and the body is formed entirely out of aluminium. Another notable feature is the distinctive mother-of-pearl instrument panel, which if you're going to look inside to see, a style often found on exotic European machines such as the Mercedes-Benz 540K.
And it was interesting, Richard, Salmons and Sons were in fact bought by Aston Martin in the 1950s. So a nice twist in the history of this car. It returned to the original Salmon and Sons building in Newport Pagnell for its 1980s restoration. So it's lovely to think that it went back to that building and now it's absolutely beautifully presented. And I love the grey, it really suits the car, sets off the sort of the chrome, and it really works well. It's a beautiful car. Thank you so much.
It does. I mean, if this was a saloon, you'd call it a
Doctor's Coupe. Yeah, it's got that look about it.
Yeah, it's got a lovely look, and the detail on the door, you have to see it. So do go and see Mr. Fred, and thank you very much for bringing him.
Bye, Fred. Thanks, Fred. So we've got a bit of something from France, the 1949 Delahaye 135 MS Cabriolet Iotti. Historic car. Delahaye was in fact began producing motor cars as early as 1894. And in its early history, Delahaye also powered racing motorboats. They built the engines for them. They weren't making money from that, so they concentrated on motorsport and they were very successful. But what really put them on the map was an event which we're going to refer to rather a lot today, when they won the pinnacle of motorsport, the 24 hours at Le Mans in 1938. Delahaye also unveiled in 1938 the 135 model, as you can see here. It was unveiled in Paris. It was available in many forms, including upgraded variants, such as the Modified M and the Modified Speciale or Special, as you can see here.
And Delahaye 135s are also well known for being clothed in some of the most extravagant and flamboyant one-off bodies by the leading French carrosserie of the time, such as Figoni and Falaschi, Franet and Salchi. And the French are pretty good at Art Deco. However, this rare cabriolet example is one of just 3 examples bodied by lesser known Torinese coach builders Viotti. And Viotti regularly worked for Fiat, Lancia and Alfa Romeo, which is why Peter is interested to see the resemblance to the Alfa Romeo grille. And this very rare motor car has had just 2 previous owners. It was discovered in Switzerland in 1988 in a very sorry state, but thankfully it was rescued and subjected to a painstaking 10-year restoration involving much research to present it as beautifully as it is today. So thank you so much for bringing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So here's a gorgeous 1926 Bentley 3-litre black manual. Thank you, Chris, for bringing it. Now, the 1920s Bentley was not only an extremely successful racing car, it was glamorous. In the 20s heyday, affiliated with flapping skirts, jazz and daredevil aviation pioneers. Don't they look the part? Following a tough Le Mans Bentley team car old number 7, one of the best owned 3-litres, battle-scarred and bent was rolled into the Savoy Hotel dining room during its own victory dinner. And one of the things we love about these old cars is the personal story that goes with them.
Richard, this car has a lovely story. It's been in the same family since the 1950s, undergone 2 restorations, a car-loving family of racers as well. I see a racer in the driver's seat here. It was in fact used to take this driver to school. Obviously it was already a classic at that stage. It wasn't a new car, was it, Chris? Built in 1926, the car, not Chris, as a red label speed chassis. Speed models sit on the cut-down frame and are powered by higher compression engine, driving through the A-type transmission, the closer ratio transmission. Only 513 red label speed models were built. This car is very well conserved. It has most of its original body, all of its original mechanical components, and as we know, that's quite unusual on a Bentley. So it's also a special factory model built to celebrate Bentley's success at the Isle of Man TT. But just a couple of words, Chris, as I've got my extended microphone. What were the other boys going to school in those days?
Well, that's a good question. When I was at prep school, we were really looked down on because we had a really old car. But I recall some of my classmates, but taken in things like Jaguar Mark 7s, and I think somebody had a Continental Bentley, and really posh cars, whereas we were the poor relations.
And so, I mean, we know you as a car lover, connoisseur, and a great enthusiast, often to be seen late at night, tinkering, enjoying that while everyone else is having some rosé. But was it this car that really ignited your passion for cars?
No, as a matter of fact, it wasn't. This car almost turned me off motor cars because my father was a perfectionist, and he would be very proud of the car today, and he only actually died this year at nearly 101. So he's probably looking down and very pleased that so far I haven't managed to ruin his old car. But he, as I said, nearly turned me off on cars because as a Concours, I was given the task of removing sellotape from the headlights because the car had been round the track. And in removing the sellotape, off came some paint, and that was like World War III to my dad, who was, who had the most useless son you could imagine. However, since then I discovered a love for cars, and I'm very, very happy to have the car back in the family, and our grandchildren absolutely love it. And I never drove it when my father had it, and I must say that it's a completely different experience to an Alfa Romeo, which is my kind of first love, but it's a lovely, lovely car to drive. It's a gentle giant, unlike me.
I mean, it's a wonderful story, Chris. It has, I think, perfect proportions as a motor car, and I'm pleased to know that the sellotape story stopped. So, thank you.
Well, Chris, fantastic car. Thank you for bringing it. It's a lovely speed model, 3-litre Bentley.
By Vauxhall in Luton, Bedfordshire, from 1913 to 1927. And Vauxhall's own description was the super excellent 3098. the Vauxhall Velox sporting car, and Velox coming from the Latin for swift, or in fact the Italian for fast veloce. The 3098 was the first car that was guaranteed by its manufacturer to be capable of attaining 100 miles per hour, and please note it only has rear-wheel brakes.
You had to be brave in those days. Now, originally delivered to an Argentinian horse breeder, this car has had an adventurous life. It won a VSCC Concours before immediately setting off on a series of worldwide rallies across Russia, where in fact it was driven by our patron, His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Kent. It also went to India and to San Francisco. This lovely example celebrated its 100th birthday this year with a drive from Leicestershire to Stornoway in Scotland, as you do in lockdown. A properly driven 3098 will give any vintage Bentley reason to pay attention, so I think we should pitch this against 3 litre speed.
Well, coming from you, Richard, it was brave of you to say that.
Well,
I know you love your
I didn't
Bentley.
write this, so you can tell. But we also should remind everybody here, of course, that this was the winner of the RAC Club Trophy last year, which is why it's main concourse. We're very, very happy indeed you could make it, and we love the picture of it racing the rotunda in the RAC, and I'm sure it got a lot of attention. So thank you very much for bringing me.
Thanks, it's nice to see you again. Thank you. You can stay, but others may. Sorry, do you need a bump start? We're patient, there's no rush. Perfect. So
Nothing to worry about. Thank you very much.
really nice, thank you. Well, next up, Richard, is a 1961 Facel Vega HK500. Aircraft industry. Facel began producing motorcar bodies for Simca and Panhard. The original Facel Vega was introduced in 1954 as a handsome 4-seat luxury car fitted with a trusty and great sounding American V8. The HK500 was introduced in this model, was introduced in 1959 and 500 examples were built, finishing in 1961. And they were advertised with the slogan, "For the few who own the finest." So what can you say about that?
Well, not what you've written. The thumping power from the 6.6 litre Chrysler V8, they were the pinnacle of luxury with its 4-seat high-speed motoring spec. The tubular chassis was designed by British racing driver Lance Macklin, and the claimed top speed was 147 miles an hour. Stylish, glamorous and exotic in the 60s, they soon became favoured by celebrities of the era, including Tony Curtis, Ava Gardner and Ringo Starr. Mechanics Illustrated magazine tester Tom McCahill said the HK500 was, and I quote, "sexier than a Plastigal and throatier than a Russian peso." Thank you very much for bringing it.
Can you say that again? Please.
So now we have a 1958 Ferrari 250 GT Elena. The Ferrari 250 name was awarded to an array of different Ferrari models, both competition and road. Basically, the roads are now a 3-litre V12.
It's very
Rolled out
American,
of the
yeah.
road, the 250 GT road car was first introduced in 1954, was built by Pininfarina, who worked with Councours, Ferrari's leading coach builder. However, production challenges meant that Pininfarina temporarily turned to Mario Buono for assistance, and the model became known as the 250 GT Buono. In 1957, Mario moved on to the Fiat styling team, and his son-in-law Ezio Elena took over the building of the 250 GT.
And just 50 Elena Coupés were built, the first of which still had the low roof line as per the Buono built cars. These have a slightly higher roof line. It's interesting, they're also very often presented in two-tone colour schemes as this one. They've become extremely rare because many of these bodies were unloved, these cars were unloved and rebodied and remodeled to replicate things like Tour de France's. So actually there's about 15 estimated to be surviving today. The Elena achieved some competition success as well at the Nürburgring and the Tour de France, and this model is a beautifully presented example of a car which is now becoming increasingly rare, so thank you for bringing it. Of course, after this, production returned to Pininfarina, so they are very rare, and it's a very understated car.
Ferrari.
It's me. Oh, I see. Hello, Jeremy. How are you? Nice to see you. So this is a 1952 Porsche 550 Sport Roadster, or America Roadster. The forerunner, in fact, to the very well-known legendary motor car, an instantly recognisable motor car, the Porsche 356 Speedster. This is the Type 540, also known as the America Roadster. US importer Max Hoffman had convinced Porsche that it needed a lightweight convertible to compete with the offerings from Jaguar and Austion-Healey, whose largest markets were, of course, the US. So this model was born.
It only had minimal weather protection, but could keep up with larger sports cars of the era. However, production was far too expensive, and only 17 America Roadsters were built, with many raced successfully by wealthy gentlemen drivers. Having tested the market, the stripped-back avant-garde 356 Speedster was born and sold in the thousands. Special external fuel filler and wire mesh headlights covers point to the racing exploits of this car, which is believed to be the only example in Europe. Thank you very much for bringing it.
Thanks, Jerry. Next up, Richard, is a 1960 MGA twin cam works Sebring competition car. The MGA was in fact a huge commercial success. Over 100,000 cars were built, the majority go into North America. Although very few were twin cam examples, only around 3,000 I believe. It's very much a motor car for bombing around the English countryside, chewing a pipe and sporting a flat cap, as this owner does. But this is a very different car from those mass-produced production cars. UMO 93 was part of a team of just 3 works cars, plus a practice car, prepared for the BMC Works department and entered for Sebring in 1960. And this actual car finished 4th in class and 29th overall. Not a bad achievement. It went on racing in SCCA events, the Sports Car Club of America, driven sparingly on the road up until around 1970, when the clutch failed and it retired with a mere 5,139 miles on the odometer.
And then in 2003, a thorough mechanical restoration was carried out by the rest of the car, but the rest of the car was left untouched, leaving it exactly as it was when it left Sebring in 1960, still bearing the names of the drivers painted on the side of the car. Competition features include the close ratio gearbox, limited slip diff, aluminium hardtop, the bonnet scoop, the extra air intake and outlet, and twin driving lamps and long distance fuel tank. So many race cars have been crashed, bent, modified and molested, but this historic racing MGA is the only remaining unrestored BMC works prepared car still in its original condition for its 1960 race configuration, and it still only records 6,500 miles from new. Thank you very much for bringing it.
Time warp condition, like it. So next, Richard, is a 1959 Austion-Healey 3000 Mark 1 works Sebring competition car. And again, obviously, Sebring was an important event to enter in the 1950s and do well. Developed from the 106 or the Big Healey 3000, which is one of the best loved British sports cars of all time. It was often referred to, in fact, as the hairy-chested British sports car, but this has been driven by the lovely Vanessa Finberg, so we better not say that. But they were also rallied and raced with great aplomb, and this is one of those competition Healeys, Richard.
Yeah, it's a full works prepared racer built for the factory team drivers, no bumpers, lightweight fiberglass hardtop fitted, and many other racing modifications. And the famous Jack Sears originally used this car to test 3-piston gurney brakes for BMC at Silverstone. And the car was also a works BMC entry in the 1960 Sebring 12 hours and raced in a variety of sports car club of America events. Vanessa, thank you for bringing it.
Thank you, Vanessa. Next we have another important British sports racing car, the 1960 Aston Martin DB4 GT, with its own Anthony Mooney. This probably looks similar to the Roadburn DB4, but that's where the similarities end. It's much rarer, of course. The DB4 GT is one of just 45 made in right-hand drive from a total production of 75. Its chassis has been shortened by 5 inches. It has external fuel filler. It's much lighter. It has a twin plug cylinder head, so it has 12 spark plugs in total on a 6-cylinder engine. Power was increased to over 300 horsepower, which was a lot for a late 1950s 6-cylinder motor. The rear seats were removed, glass was replaced with perspex, the drivers went on diets, and this resulted in a 200-pound weight saving overall.
And another visual cue feature distinguishing this from the standard car is the headlights, which are moved back and fed in behind perspex, as you can see, a look that would stick on the DB5. Now, competition successes abound, and many of the greatest drivers of the period raced DB4 GTs. This car has always been in the UK and belonged for a period to the pioneering historic race of the Honourable Patrick Lindsay. The DB4 GT is the sort of car that we race on a Sunday and driven to the office on a Monday, and no doubt that's still the case. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you very much. Well, next, Richard, we've got a slightly later car, a 1965 Ferrari 275 GTB Competizione Clienti. It's called a Competizione Clienti rather than a GTB-C, because Ferrari looked at this and said, that's been pretty good, why don't we build a bespoke competition car? So we should remember that we're going to be talking about the Ferrari-Ford battle at Le Mans a little bit later. We have the GT40s and the Ferrari P cars, but actually further down the field in the different classes, 275 GTB-Cs, competition cars were racing against the likes of Cobras, so there was competition throughout the pack. And this is just the sort of Ferrari that was battling those races. Based on the road-going 275 GTB 2-cam with the short nose, they came in two versions, long and short nose, as well as later the 4-cam. It has a fabulous competition specification, including of course Dunlop racing tyres. The axle ratio is as per the Tour de France, 140 40-litre long-distance fuel tank, all-alloy body of course, 6 carburetors, outside fuel filler, and something that people really love about this particular model of the 275 is these external vents behind the brakes here, and of course it just gives it that aggressive competition look.
Now this is one of the 10 Series 1 short-nosed 275 GTB Competiciones built between February and September 1965. The second built, it was ordered in right-hand drive, similar to the prototype. Right-hand drive cars were still being ordered for racing purposes. Sold new to Harry Napier of Ireland to compete in the 1965 Tour de France, but sadly the event was cancelled. It was then raced at Kyrgyzstan 4 times, achieving 1 first, 1 second and 3 third places before Napier sold the car in 1973. Now it's regularly seen in historic race meetings today, and these 275s can easily be driven to the track, raced and then driven home again. And such was the popularity and success of these cars that Ferrari went on to build a second series of further developed GTB-Cs based on later chassis series with a long-nosed body set. Thank you very much for bringing this wonderful car. Thank you.
If you haven't joined us at the Concours live stage, I suggest that you do now, because it's a real privilege. We're going to be talking about Le Mans a lot today, and we're going to be talking about the Ford versus Ferrari battle at Le Mans, but of course there's another manufacturer that did pretty well at Le Mans, and now we have the 1969 Porsche 917K. You don't often see these cars being driven at events like this. This is the actual car, the actual 917, that achieved Porsche's first ever overall win at Le Mans, with Hans Hermann and Richard Atwood at the wheel against fierce competition from Ferrari in the fire trials. Hello, that looks good, beautifully driven. This is that actual car. The first victory would pave the way for Porsche winning at Le Mans a staggering 19 times so far. Just to put that into perspective, if you want to carry on, yeah. I'm not sure I need to describe this, Richard. I think it does it for itself. But no, Porsche pretty good. 19 times so far for Porsche. So it's won almost as many times as Ferrari, Jaguar and Bentley. But also, I just want to put 580 brake horsepower into perspective, which is what this car had. We've talked about, well, we're going to be seeing a Ferrari Daytona later, which was the world's fastest production car, capable of 174 miles per hour. And the Daytona had 320 to 350 horsepower, depending on whose specification you read. But it was also the world's fastest production car, capable of 174 miles an hour. But I don't think it was quite as light as a 917. So just think about that car on the Mulsanne straight, in the rain, during the night, tired, and you've got a bit of a story about that, Richard, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is, of course, the 917KH, or short tail English number 23, wears the famous, world-famous red, white Salzburg livery. Atwood and Herman did not lead the race from start to finish. At first, they were struggling to keep the pace, and then the heavens opened and the experienced pairing sped on through the night in atrocious conditions and with misfiring problems on the car. Now, this was the first victory for Porsche, and it was all about this machine, but it was also about the skill, bravery, endurance, and determination of the two great racing drivers. And Dickie Atwood discovered that he'd been suffering from the mumps throughout the race, so that's British pluck for you.
That's the stuff of heroes, isn't it? Stuff of legends. So next up, please do join us, Bertie. The 1970 Ferrari 365 GTB4, also known as the Daytona GT Berlinetta 4-cam engine, presented by the Gilbert-Smith family. Long-term owners, well-respected owners who use their cars extremely regularly as they're meant to be used. So of course the Daytona is an iconic car with its 4.4 litre V12, 6 Weber carburetors, pushing out that 320 to let's say 350 because we've got a Daytona on the stage. As I say, it was the fastest production car in its day, and this is an exceptional example. It has the plexiglass at the front demonstrated, which makes it coveted, collectible. So often with cars, it's the very first examples that are coveted and people lust after them, and they're often produced in lower numbers, as is the case with the plexiglass Daytona. So as I say, it's officially named the 365 GTB4, but it became known as the Daytona following Ferrari's legendary 1-2-3 finish in the prototype class at the 1967 Daytona 12-hour race.
And this instantly recognisable example is one of only 11 finished in the distinctive 1970s colour scheme of viola with black interior. But it's not just beautiful to look at. This car is well driven all over the continent, has been in the care of the delightful Gilbert-Smith family for many years. Paul Frere said he couldn't hear the radio 120 miles an hour, but if you go faster, it's the engine that makes the music, the finest music of all to the ears of the enthusiast. A car is only original once. Bertie, thank you for bringing it.
Thank you, Bertie. Well, next up, ladies and gentlemen, Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen,
None other than CC Muldoon. Now here's a rakish little British sports car. Now, one would like to say it's the sort of car that would have been driven, perhaps a little worse for wear, around the RAF bases of wartime Britain. But clearly, its appeal is broader and far more graceful than that. The MGPA has a strong association with lady drivers, following the excellent exploits of the all-female team of drivers, also known as Easton's Dancing Daughters of the 1935 Le Mans 24 Hours. And the three-car, six-driver team finished 8th, 9th and 10th in their class in what must have been a pretty grueling and hair-raising 24 hours. And two of the team had already been awarded with the coveted 120 mile an hour badge from Brooklyn.
And that was quite something, the 120 mile an hour badge of Brooklyn. Now you've infected me with badges and not badges. And the competition cars featured the, it does have 3 seats. I can see you in the back there, Amanda. How can I miss you? Looking good. I mean, that's as they should be driven, of course. Now, the competition cars featured also a Marshall supercharger, which also became available for customer cars, and as is fitted to this car. And this car has a lovely known provenance from new. It spent most of its life in Spain, which is where the lovely CC acquired the car. It's charming, it's sweet, but don't mess with it, hey? Or the car. Great, CC. It's
Thank you, gentlemen, ladies. Nice to see you.
Well, introduced twice. It's the 1972 Maserati Spider, the SS. This is Simon. Hello, Simon. So, first presented to the public at the 1968 Turin Motor Show, of course, the contemporary of the Daytona. This is the open-top version of the Ghibli. Penned by Giorgetto Giugiaro. Approximately 125 Spiders were built, 45 of which were equipped with the more powerful SS engine, the 4.9 litre SS engine, and this is one of just 4 Ghibli SSs in right-hand drive. And I thought you like left-hand drive. I've done my research and written it down, it helps. So, shipped to the UK as a new car and distributed to the Citroen UK London, where it was sold to its first owner, Sheikh Hamad bin Al Thani, a member of the ruling factory family of Qatar. Your name's much easier. So.
You nearly got the name right there, Peter. Finished in Bianco Polo, upholstered in blue collar leather, and fitted with Campagnola wheels. It has a fresh and summery feel, just as a Campari poured. Who wrote this? Just as a Campari poured over ice. In the late 1980s, it was the subject of a cover feature in Classic and Sports Car magazine, in which it was favourably compared to a Ferrari Daytona Spider. It's been treated to a no-expense spared concourse level restoration, which is only just recently completed. It was immediately driven to Portofino to star in a short film starring Simon Piston. So thank you very much indeed, Simon.
And Cujo.
Thank you, Simon.
Nor could I. Next up, Richard, is the 1950, I can't miss this car, the 1957 Bentley S1 Continental Drophead Coupe by the coach builders Councours. So from 1950 until 1959, all Bentley cars featured an enlarged version of the legendary and smooth six-cylinder engine. No other motor cars offered the same silence, smoothness and total absence of vibration as this power plant. And the S1 Bentleys were among the last built in the true coach building tradition, but also the last to be powered by this six-cylinder engine. And there's just one other thing I wanted to add, Richard, before you come in. We talk again about power, but people talk about the park-board bodies. You know, this is a long chassis, but it was about the refinement of getting that body onto the chassis, eliminating all the rattles, the squeaks, the squirts, everything, to make it drive beautifully, because you get a lot of flex in the chassis, and it obviously emits sound through the body. And they got it just right with this.
They knew what they were doing, these coach builders. So, you know, Parkwood made the most beautiful of the S1 convertibles. But this desirable Continental option was an upgrade featuring more sporty suspension, a higher ratio rear axle and a rev counter. And this option made these large and elegant Bentleys surprisingly sporty and nimble to drive. It's said that the S1 Continental by Parkwood handled significantly better than its contemporaries by HWM Company, James Young and Freestone and Webb, which is most likely to do with the way the bodies are attached to the chassis, as you were saying. Equally, the Parkwood Drophead design is perhaps the most beautiful of any post-war Bentley, and the lines of this example are certainly accentuated by this extremely handsome two-tone colour scheme. So, Eric, congratulations, well done, P.A. Wood. It's looking beautiful. Thank you for bringing it.
And I think, Richard, we should point out for everybody, go and have a look at this car. When people talk about shut lines and panel fit, just look at the way the bonnet runs along the line of the bulkhead there and the doors. You know, 1 or 2 millimeter panel gaps all around. It's absolutely beautiful. It's perfection. Really nicely done. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have this 1966 Porsche 911S, driven by our main sponsor, Wilhelm Schmidt, Leyat Hélica. This is the 2-litre flat 6 air-cooled 160 brake horsepower engine, and the 2-litre S was the first ever go faster 911, thanks to that 160 horsepower development of the air-cooled flat 6. And obviously, it's one of the most instantly recognisable motor cars on the planet. The clean lines were penned by Ferdinand Alexander Porsche, nicknamed Woodsy, who was the grandson of Ferdinand Porsche, and they're timeless, and the lines continue to be referenced in modern 911 base models to this very day. Exquisite build quality, minimalist, understated, and delivers with precision and accuracy, and will be coveted by collectors for many years to come. Well, that's our thoughts on Langer & Zoner, and it perfectly describes the 911S as well.
Well, absolutely, Richard. I mean, it's all about build quality, and we talked about that with the Bentley, and we've talked about cars doing exactly what they say on the tin, and the 911 is a fine example of that. This example is the short wheelbase example, as you say, to the S specification, also characterised by the distinctive Fuchs wheels. It was in fact delivered new to Sweden, where it was just 3 weeks after the model's debut at the Frankfurt Motor Show. And it lived in the Arctic Circle for some 50 years from new, until it was discovered by our good friend Mr. Wilhelm Schmidt from Langer & Zoner. So we might just ask you to say a couple of words, Wilhelm, if that's okay. I won't scratch your power with my wand, but I'm a bit nervous.
I won't try, gentlemen. To be honest, even I'm a German, I was never a Porsche man. I honestly say that. I bought a car because of the color combination, and then I drove it for the first time, and it will never leave my garage again. These cars are phenomenal to drive, and they are tiny, but Jesus, they are quick. And they do what they're supposed to do, which I really like. Not all my English cars do that, actually.
Well, as you know, as a head man at Langanzoni, you know a thing or two about exquisite movements and things working as they should, and obviously you're a very good judge with your motor cars too, and this is a fine example of it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your ongoing support of the event.
Pleasure.
Delighted to have you here.
I usually don't mix pleasure and business, but this weekend I make an exception.
You're doing a good job there.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Thank you, Wilhelm. So do go and see Wilhelm and Teef at A. Langanzoni. Got some wonderful timepieces here. But enjoy this lovely 911 Porsche as well.
I told your brother, you changed your shoes. Your brother's looking very like you right now.
We're kind of growing into a similar thing.
And I'm
Well, next up we see the competition variant. This is the 1965 short nose. This is the 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB4. And again, 4 standing for 4 camshafts on the V12 engine. These cars are known as the 4-cam, it's as simple as that. So when a car is as sought after as these, you can simply call it the 4-cam. It's a nickname and everybody knows what it is. It was Ferrari's first dual overhead cam road car, the ultimate evolution of Ferrari's classically styled 1960s 275 Berlinetta and the predecessor to the Daytona. So it has front engine V12 power, triple Webers, 5-speed gearbox, Nardi wood rim grille, long bonnet, sharp black gills as we've already mentioned in the sail panels and the front wings, and it just gives it that aggressive sporting look, complemented by the covered headlamps which everybody likes, the power bulge in the hood to accommodate the 4-cam motor, and Varani aluminium wire wheels to finish it off.
Peter, I think you can safely say this is one of the most iconic, prized and usable sports cars of the 20th century, and one of only 330 built. This is a seductive example finished in Grigio Ferro with Bordeaux leather interior, and of course it's certified by the factory as fully correct. And again, these cars are so nice to drive. Even today, they can easily be driven every day of the week. So thank you very much for bringing this lovely Ferrari 275 GTB4. This is a great colour sport as well.
Like your time. Next up, Richard, is the 1962. We've seen the Facel HK500. We've got the Facel 2 from 1962, which is really the luxury version of the Facel. This is the majestic motor car. One of the three to display the old school Porsche from 1962. One of these UK cars was in fact purchased new by Ringo Starr. These are cars that attracted celebrity owners, and also those of the motor racing fraternity, Rob Walker and Sterling Mosso Classic 2s. You shouldn't be surprised, as this was the fastest 4-seater motor car available in the world in the time. 62 miles an hour, 100 in 1962, excuse me, got a bit tired. It would go 152 miles an hour as a 4-seat car in 1962. And don't forget that the E-Type just about managed to do 150 miles an hour as a 2-seat Coupé, which may have been slightly tweaked. So an incredible achievement. And what do you expect from the pumping 6.7 litre big Chrysler motor under the hood? This was the press car that was originally delivered to a title owner.
A title owner, well, the second owner took the Facel off the road at 27,000 miles after he had issues replacing the inadequate Marshall headlights. And from 1967 until 97, the Facel sat in a garage. Apparently the garage also collapsed. But extensively restored by Romance and Rust in the late 1990s and finished in this exotic shade of metallic peacock blue, which is Rolls-Royce colour, of course. The current owner returned to Romance and Rust for some refreshing and detailed work in readiness for this very weekend. But Lance remembers with pride every detail of his initial restoration. And in this specification, with just 28,000 miles approved, this French gentleman's club on wheels is a rare example. Thank you very much indeed.
Most of us seen the film, Le Mans 66, and that recounts the story of 5 years before Enzo Ferrari selling half of his business to Fiat in 1968. He nearly struck a deal with the Ford Motor Company. After 22 days of intense negotiations, Enzo walked away after he found a clause that he believed seriously compromised the total freedom he had been promised as a racing team director. Thank you, Michael. So this incensed Henry Ford II that he decided to beat Ferrari at their own game. And this was one of the cars that obviously the Carroll Shelby, originally designed around the ACA chassis. Carroll Shelby felt that this chassis would work very well, worked very well with the V8 power from America, the V8 muscle from America. So of course the Ace was designed by the highly successful and very well respected engineer John Tajero, but obviously Shelby didn't think it had enough power. It had a 6-cylinder engine. So it got some muscle and installed in originally the 260 cubic inch small block Ford V8 into a modified chassis. It then came into the 289, such as this car, the 289 cubic inches. The fearsome AC Cobra was born in 1962. And this 289 Cobra chassis COB 6041 is a car with an impressive international period competition history. Upgraded for endurance events by Alan Mann Racing, it carries a works prepared motor as well as gearbox and brakes. And with its Halley brand wheels fitted within those muscular arches, fully filling those muscular arches, side exhaust as we can hear and feel. I'm sure my trousers are nice and clean now. Thanks, Michael. This is a seriously aggressive and purposeful looking Cobra.
It was competitively raced throughout Europe in the mid-1960s and has an impressive roster of podiums and finishes. It continues to be campaigned at FIA historic events to this day. And as we know, the Cobra then puffed itself up for the 7-litre, 427 cubic inch big block motor, and for a time was the fastest accelerating sports car on the planet. Incredibly, it could accelerate to 100 miles per hour and back to a standstill in just 40.5 seconds. So what a beast. Thank you very much, Michael Reed.
Thanks, Michael. It's the greatest Ferrari of all time, if not the greatest sports racing car of all time. Breathtakingly beautiful, purposeful and aggressive lines from Scaglietti, and engineering genius from Giotto Bizzarini and Mauro Foggieri. Blistering performance and a crackling exhaust note like no other. Built to race and to win, of the 36 cars built in total, 32 were Series 1 cars originally. Some of the Series 1 cars were later converted to Series 2 design. And one of the distinctive features of the GTO is the 3 removable D-shaped air, when in fact in the front here has these 3 removable D-shaped vents to allow greater airflow on certain circuits. But when we speak of airflow, there's an interesting story about this, Richard. I was speaking to Mr. Philip Porter, who wrote the book earlier. The Jaguar wanted to do a bit more racing in the early 60s with their E-Type, and they were looking to make it go quicker, of course, so they were looking at airflow, and they managed to borrow, and it's denied by the gentleman that loaned the car, Mr. John Coombs, who's no longer with us, but they managed to borrow a GTO and look at the airflow across the body, and they did it in a very basic, rudimentary way by just sticking tufts of cotton all over the car and finding out where it wasn't moving around, where it wasn't flowing freely, and they used that to help modify the design for the low drag E-Type. Fascinating, very basic engineering.
And you can see, look at Joe in there, the driving position is perfection with a high gear lever, close at hand. This is the second 250 GTO built, and they were all a little different. Chassis number 3387 GT began life as Scuderia Ferrari's own factory test machine, a Monza, and it features this pop-riveted rear spoiler which you can see there. Delivered to Luigi Cinetti Motors in New York, where as the Ferrari North American Racing Team, or NART entry, it became the first 250 GTO to officially compete in a race. Joe, thank you for bringing the car. Great to have you with us. Bentley 4.25 litre open tourer by Van den Pla. Now, it's actually officially owned by Gillian Portis and Georgina Cosgrove, but they've loaned it to our patron for the day, and he's making a good job of escorting it around the courtyard. Now, following Rolls-Royce purchase of Bentley from receivership in 1931, Bentley production was moved to Derby, and a new era of Bentley motor cars was born. Now known as the Derby Bentleys, they're available with two engine sizes. Initially, the 3.5 litre and then the 4.25 litre, as well as the MX variant, which is fitted with an overdrive just before the Second World War. Chassis was still supplied to the coach builder of the customer's choice, and Van den Pla was amongst the very best, although they only built 11 cars in this style on the 4.25 litre chassis.
And as you know, Richard, so good was the build quality of these motor cars, and so silent was that lovely, silky smooth 6-cylinder engine that they became known as and marketed as the silent sports car, as we can of course hear. And this lovely example has been in the same care for 39 years and is presented in remarkably original condition. It's in time warp condition, in fact. It's never been restored, the engine has never been rebuilt, and it's still silky smooth, of course. And the leather trim, hood and tonneau are all original from new and remain in remarkably good condition. An exceptional example, it's incredibly understated, beautiful Van den Pla lines, as you say, very rare, a debonair motor car.
It is, with a debonair driver. Sir, thank you very much for bringing the car up. Lovely to have you with us today at your concourse. I hope you're enjoying yourself, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for bringing the car. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to this lovely 4.25 litre Bentley and to our great patron, His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Kent, who will now endeavour to restart it and leave the stage. It's so quiet you can't tell whether the engine's running or not. Thank you, sir. It worked. Beautiful.
Well, next, Richard, I don't think he's going to be very silent. It's another one of the motor cars celebrating those fabulous battles between Ford and Ferrari in the mid-1960s. The poster car of a generation, just 40 inches in height, hence its name. The 1965 Ford GT40 Mark I, and this is a Ford of France car, chassis number 1007. Great number. Capable of well over 200 miles per hour, the muscular GT40 was developed with one single purpose in mind, and that was to beat Ferrari at Le Mans. As the first cars struggled to be competitive, so for 1966 the GT40 was lightened, its steel tub was replaced by an aluminium honeycomb design, the front profile was reduced, and its aerodynamics much improved. The project would cost Ford around $9 million in the mid-1960s, so quite a lot of money. However, it was a small price to pay, and it paid off handsomely, Richard.
Yeah, the Ford, as you say, the Ford project cost around $9 million. But in 1966, at the Le Mans race, Ford GT40s finished in first, second, and third positions, and Ferrari had seen its final victory at the event. Now, GT40 chassis number 1007 was one of 10 4.7 litre production GT40s built during the 1965 season. It also scored 6th overall at Monza 1,000 kilometres and gained 2 wins at Montléry. Now, GT40s went on to dominate the most grueling of motor racing tests winning at Le Mans in 67, 68 and 69. Now, following an accident at the end of the 66 season, it was completely rebuilt to the latest spec by Ford Advanced Vehicles in Slough. It went on to compete in the 1967 World Endurance Series, scoring a class win in the Monza 1,000 kilometres race. So here we have a very special GT40, ladies and gentlemen, and a fitting part of this Ford versus Ferrari battle.
Thank you for bringing it, which is going to be reenacted in the morning. It's a great livery as well, isn't it? The 1965 Ferrari 250 LM standing for Le Mans. The 250 LM is widely applauded as one of the greatest Ferraris of all time. Do you want to carry on or stay? Love it if you stay. So one of the greatest Ferraris of all time, and as we know, classic Ferraris are frequently referred to by the total capacity, so it's the number of cylinders and the cubic capacity for each cylinder. What would you like to do? You want to carry on? Carry on. So 12 times 250 equals 3,000, hence the 250 series of 3-litre V12 Ferraris. However, not in this case. This but I thought it was worth mentioning the prototype, the 365P, because we haven't had one at this event before. It's such a spectacularly beautiful car. It's a very important piece of mid-60s racing history from the golden age.
So ladies and gentlemen, this is the 1997 Porsche 911 GT1 Evolution. What an astonishing car we have here. Now, Le Mans would not be the same without Porsche, and Porsche would not be the same without Le Mans. Porsche has been victorious at the most famous and grueling of all races, donated the 19 times, more than any other manufacturer. So in the mid-1990s, they felt it was time for a new car to compete with McLaren and Ferrari in the GT1 class. Porsche felt it smarter to build a bespoke race car and detune it for road use to meet homologation requirements, and only 25 cars need to be built to homologate it for road use. So that's what they did with this car.
The original GT1 performed well with the GT1 victory at Le Mans on its first attempt, but the 97 Evolution had better aerodynamics and acceleration, and Porsche had their sights on an overall win. And a 600 brake horsepower flat 6 turbo propelled this carbon fibre Kevlar bodied GT1 Evolution to nearly 200 miles per hour. And then at Le Mans this car qualified third, but ultimately its gearbox failed and its best result was third at Laguna Seca. But I really think it was interesting the point you were making earlier, thank you Richard, about Porsche just reversed the way they were approaching Concours of Elegance, but the drivers are doing it. That's a start. But of course, this isn't just any old Land Rover. This is the very first production Land Rover ever, chassis number 1. Inspired by the Willys Overland post-war Jeep and christened Land Rover to rove the land. The initial mule prototype, in fact, we talked about McLaren McLarens featured a central driving position. I didn't know that. It was launched at the Amsterdam Motor Show on the 30th of April 1948. And within a year, they built an incredible 8,000 of these, which is staggering. They're of course robust, strong, and do exactly what they say on the tin.
Now, Dewey, this is known, or he's a he, originally intended for King George's VI, but remained with Land Rover instead. And this particular Land Rover was left for years, exposed to the elements on the owner's Northumberland farm. Following its display of the Land Rover's 50th anniversary, it returned to rest until acquired by the present owner in 2017, that was subjected to a painstaking preservation, restoration, with historical preservation as a priority. As we know, Land Rovers have been built for over 70 years, but here you have the very first, ladies and gentlemen, so thank you very much. 4,000 hours of not doing anything visible. That's tough. Congratulations.
Thank you. Fiat 2432 Councours, 6.9 litres, 4 cylinders. Imagine the size of each cylinder. A true leviathan of a motor car from the fabulous Italiana Automobile Torino, or Fiat. Artillery-style wooden wheels, sumptuous button-back leather upholstery, twin side-mounted spares, lots of rich polished brass. It really is a very elegant car indeed. I love the front mudguards, clearly made to get people and pedestrians wet when you go through a puddle. I think that's fabulous, this motor car, Richard. They were expensive cars when they were new, but they were good for 120 kilometres an hour. I'm not sure I'd like to do that in this. Twin chain driven, of course. This car in New York would have cost $9,000 when it was new, and that's in 1904. That's a staggering sum of money.
I think you'd probably get your money back, wouldn't you, I think, at least. Now, this was purchased new by Mr. and Mrs. George Agassiz of Cape Cod in Massachusetts, having seen the car whilst they're on honeymoon in Europe. And George was clearly a car guy, having visited the Fiat factory during his honeymoon. Shipped back to Cape Cod, where Mabel drove the Fiat with her brother for some 28 years, and then comes the twist, because following the death of Mabel's brother, the Fiat was buried on the family estate, upside down, and minus the body. Is that the car body or Mabel's body? I wonder. 10 years later, Ted Robinson, a founder of the Vintage Sports Car Club of America, learned of the buried Fiat by holidaying in Cape Cod. He obtained permission to disinter the car and was able to buy it for $50. Of the 400 or so of this model built, it's only thought that around 5 have survived to this day, and I wonder how many of the others are buried as well. It's a grand old motor car with a fascinating story to tell, and having been issued with a 1904 dating certificate, this car is a regular participant on the well-known RAC London to Brighton veteran car run.
Thank you, Richard. London to Brighton this year. Get yourself along, ladies and gentlemen, to High Park, see the start of the London to Brighton then. And say hello, that's a great car, love it, thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you very much. Wonderful 1904 Fiat 2432 Open Tourer.
I think Richard, that really coming up quicker than we're ready.
Yeah, so to win them all 24 hours, I've done so no fewer than 5 times by 1930. Now Wolf Bonato, who was the chairman of Bentley and great Bentley boy, commissioned this charismatic 4.5 metre gurney nutting. Interesting feature is this special rear cockpit. Now Bonato was one of the Bentley boys, a 3 times Le Mans 24-hour winner. In fact, he's still the only driver to have won every Le Mans race he entered. Entered 3, won 3. And probably next to Tim Burke, he's probably the most easily recognised of the Bentley boys.
And I think he also penned this design himself, I believe, Richard, along with the Blue Train, the Speed 6 Blue Train. It has some wonderful, unique features, such as these upturned rear mudguards and, as you say, the central seat with the aero screen. His personal cars are always rather special. And what I can finish by saying is the esteemed racing driver and historian Rivers Fletcher considered this particular car during Benetto's time to be the best blower Bentley, and I loved it. As simple as that.
Just one, this is a pub quiz question for you here. Benetto, as you say, was a 3 times the more winner. When you look at the curled edges to the mudguards, the Gurney Nutty design, the inspiration for those is the fireman's helmets from the French firemen at Le Mans. The pompier who have the helmet, which has the flick over the collar, that's the inspiration for the Gurney Nutty wings. Thank you for bringing the wonderful car. Delighted, Leisure, to bring another gorgeous Bentley 4.5 litre blower, this time by Van den Pla, from a private collection. Delighted to see that part of the private collection's owner is here. Now, of course, blower Bentleys, originally developed by Sir Henry Tim Birkin, are the stuff of heroes and boys' own comics. Not only were they originally frowned upon by W.O. Bentley, who felt that greater displacement was the better way to win a race, and most importantly, reliable power rather than forcing air and fuel into the cylinders. Blower Bentleys powered Bentley to great success at Le Mans in the 1920s, even though a 4.5 litre never actually won the race. And in order to race at Le Mans, the rules stated that 50 road cars had to be built, and this is one of them. However, the standard road versions were detuned compared to the 240 horsepower team cars, but a special 3 was sold to virtually the same specification as the team blowers, and this is one of them.
And as you say, Richard, built very much to the same specification as the Le Mans spec cars. Has a longer bonnet. It has the aero screens, the triplex aero screens, the Birkin stone guards, a higher compression motor, different shock absorbers, all sorts of different features, a racing style cockpit, brake adjuster, 42-gallon fuel tank, and team car instrumentation. The car was supplied new to Billy Fisk, who was in fact in 1928 and 1932 a member of the US bobsleigh Winter Olympics team, a champion of the Cresta Run, and the first American to join the Royal Air Force. The type of sporting man that who was made of the right stuff. Sadly, Fisk was killed during the World War II, but as we know today, manufacturers want to sell their very best pieces to people that are going to drive them properly and get noticed in them. And clearly, Fisk was one of them, as is the present owner. So it's good to see you, and thank you for bringing the car.
Thank you very much. The wonderful Billy Fisk, our GK150, perfect example of a sporting company.
Now is a bit of an old decade with Richard. There's the 1938 Bugatti Type 57, that's a lot. We're a bit different here at the Concours of Elegance. The best in show is designed here by the entrants themselves, as you mentioned earlier. And we love having a few racing cars and competition cars, as well as this sort of motor car. The sort of Art Deco rolling sculpture that people would expect to see at a Concours d'Elegance. The Bugatti Type 57 was the first car built under Jean Bugatti, Ettore Bugatti's son. And many consider the Type 57 to be Bugatti's finest all-round motor car. It was unveiled in 1934 with a straight-eight 3.3 litre motor. It came in a number of different body styles, and some were fitted with superchargers, and this body style is one of the most beautiful.
And it's actually a one-off design by master Swiss-French coach builders Gangloff, based loosely around the original style penned by Jean Bugatti. It features the classic horseshoe radiator, of course, long, tapered teardrop wings front and rear, a very steeply raked windscreen, and a long tail with a flush-mounted covered spare wheel. It has disc wheels which are designed to be aerodynamic and lend to its neat, streamlined look. And as you can see, it also features special bumpers. The chic and sophisticated lines are accentuated by this typical Type 57 two-tone colour scheme on this car, picked out in a rather regal purple and black. Thank you so much for bringing it. It's a wonderful 38 Type 57 Bugatti Automotive.
We've talked a lot about the celebration of 25 years of McLaren's F1. We've talked about 1995 victory at that great race. And now we have 1996 McLaren F1 GTR chassis 016. So McLaren continued with their racing exploits into the 1996 season. But racing moves very quickly, as we know, and some modifications were made to make the GTR even finer. They lowered the front suspension, they gave it a deeper front spoiler and a larger rear wing. They uprated the gearbox and housed it in a lightweight magnesium casing. And the car, and presumably the drivers, went on a diet too. And these changes made the 96 F1 GTR the fastest of the GTR cars of all of the GTRs, hitting 205 miles per hour on the Mulsanne straight at Le Mans. 016 was Team Bugatti's car for the 1996 season in its eye-catching Fina livery. It finished in 11th place overall at Le Mans 24 hours in 1996, piloted by Steve Sauber, Jacques Lafitte and Marc Duez. It's now been converted again for road use by Paul Lanzanti, and what a lot of fun that would be.
So thank you, Tom. Thank you, McLaren, for bringing the car. Great to have him with us to celebrate the 25 years since the F1 Le Mans victory.
If you enjoyed this video, do please like, share and subscribe. Thank you for watching.
You can also now follow us on all the usual social media things.